Hi. Hi, this is Robin Zielhorst from Obscura, Our Oceans, and Crown Compass, and you're watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Yes.
Episode 315 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with Robin Zielhorst from Obscura, Crown Compass, and Our Oceans. So, how are you doing today, Robin?
Pretty good. I'm back from the gym just now, so if I'm look a little heated, it's the after workout sweats.
Hey, gotta get that pump in, man. Nothing wrong with that.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So, kind of the format of the show is I want to talk about your musical history and sort of do a rundown of your discography, but take me back to young Robin Zielhorst. So, kind of growing up, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to slap at a bass?
Um, I think when I was about 11 years old or something, my brother brought home. I have an older brother, Martijn. He brought home the Black Album from Metallica, and before that, he had some cassette tapes from Ozzy Osbourne and Body Count and Sepultura, stuff like that. So he introduced me to the harder styles of music, um, and somewhere I was already playing piano back then because I started when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old playing piano. And but when I was 12 or 13 years old, playing the piano was not that cool anymore. So I wanted to do something else. And yeah, I'm not sure why I ended up playing bass. But I went to the music store and I got a bass in my hands and it somehow clicked. So it kind of made sense. So I bought a bass, and after that, it was playing first of all, I think Nirvana songs because they were the easiest to figure out. Then going into Metallica, Ozzy Osbourne, Iron Maiden, stuff like that. Yeah.
All right. And I guessing because the first thing I want to talk about is believe one of your first bands was at Emerald. You did the Crown of Creation in 2004, which hard to believe it's now been 20 years. So tell me about that because I'm digging deep. Like nobody ever really talks about this stuff.
Shit. Yeah, I'm a little surprised that you know that band. Yeah, I went to the Rock Academy. It's a Dutch conservatory for pop music. Um, And as one of my final projects, we recorded an album with Emerald, which was written by the keyboardist Tom Verrijken back then. Um, yeah, it was a really cool thing to do. I think it was a old proggy rock band in which I could do yeah a lot. I played fretless bass and I played around with playing chords and intros and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course,
And of course,
that same year you also did the Intention with Fragments. Tell me about that
yeah,
because you got like two 20-year anniversary for both for two
yeah,
albums. So tell me
yeah,
about
yeah,
Intention.
yeah.
How'd you hook up with those guys?
Yeah, Intention was another project that I did for finishing my conservatory. So I recorded two albums to graduate or to finish the education. And one was with Intention, and the other was with Emerald. And Intention was, or they still exist. I discovered today. I actually got in touch with the guitar player back again. Um, but it's a female fronted. Uh, yeah, I guess it's. I'm not sure what style it
Just like
is.
progressive metal.
Yeah, I guess, but then female fronted, so it gives it a little bit more of a symphonic gothic feel, I guess. But yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. And then an
But
interesting,
it's a
yeah,
long time.
yeah, 20 years, man.
Whoa.
But yeah, but again, another thing I thought was interesting because you were part of the Blue Man Group for a
Yeah.
little bit. So tell me about that. How'd you end up hooking up with Blue Man Group?
Oh yeah, that was man. These are fun questions. I was playing with Xavius. back then, and I remember we rehearsed in Rotterdam, and I lived in a small town near Breda back then. And so I went with by train to Rotterdam, and I remember I arrived at the rehearsal space, and there was this music magazine. I'm not sure which one, but and they had this ad with the blue eyes, and they were looking for musicians, I think, or looking for bass players. I'm not sure. So somehow I got really intrigued by it. I had never heard from Bloom Group before that point. Um, so I applied, and there was a pretty intense selection procedure. Um, so there was 2 days. I had to go to Amsterdam and play around with the instruments that they use because they're using different instruments than the standard rock band. Um, and me and another Dutch guy got hired. So we went for training for 6 weeks, if I remember correctly, to Berlin. Played the show in Berlin there. Um, After which we joined the production in Amsterdam, which was starting at that point, and it ran for a year, um, which was a shame because it was a awesome location. They had their own theater which was like an industrial type uh, venue with a lot of pipes, and they colored it, and it was an insane looking venue. Um, but they were together with a Dutch musical production office, and it was, as I understood it back then, at least, it was the plan that Blue Man Group was there to stay. But at a certain point, the ticket sales dipped a little bit, and at that point, the Dutch production office said, "Okay, let's cancel the show."
Yeah.
So it ran for around a year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course that then led into, I guess you started up with the Exvius, and you did the self-titled in 2009, which this year does mark 15 years of the self-titled. So how do you feel about that album now, 15 years later? And
It's been a while since I've heard it. I have to be honest. But yeah, it's a weird idea that it's been so long already. Um, but I remember um, that I think it's a couple of years back that I listened to that first Exvius album again, and at that point it'd been a few years before I listened to it before. And I kind of heard it with really fresh ears again, and I remember being really um, like a little bit surprised by much how much information it is. So that got me kind of laughing quite a lot because um, it's maybe it's a little bit over the top.
yeah,
There's just we just wanted to do a lot, and we had a lot to say, I guess, and we tried to say everything in one album.
yeah,
And but yeah, it was really fun, that whole period with recording that album with Timon in his studio, and yeah, yeah, it's been
yeah. And then flash forward, the next thing I want to talk about is Retraced by Cynic, which I love. Cynic is one of my favorite bands. And what is it like
hmm.
working with those guys?
It was awesome. I think playing with Sean Reinert, he was probably one of the most steady drummers I've had the luxury to play with. Uh, so that was really cool. And I remember very clearly being introduced to Cynic's music when I was 18. I was graduated from high school, and Dutch guitarist Bart Hennepolf, which who plays in the band Textures, if you maybe know that.
I've heard about
Uh,
them.
yeah, yeah. So he brought that CD to my graduation party, and so he made me listen to the song "Textures" of Cynic on the Focus album, and so I was blown away. So I bought the CD the next morning without listening to it further, and yeah, over the next few years, I listened to it all the time, and I always had this idea that I would really uh, love my goal in life sort of at that point was to either have a band like Cynic or if possible Cynic itself.
Yeah.
So at a certain point I joined Exvius uh, through Steph, the drummer at that point, and um, and at a rehearsal someday. I'm not sure when it was, but apparently Timon, the guitarist of Exvius, was in touch with Paul Masvidal from Cynic, and so he so Timon showed up at the rehearsal saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, I joined Cynic." So yeah, he was going to LA to record the Trace in Air album, and so we were all, flabbergasted pretty much, and probably a little jealous. So I said to Timon, if they ever need a bass player, haha, because they won't, because they have Sean Malone. But I said if they ever need a bass player, let me know. And next thing I know, they actually needed a bass player. So I think it was early 2008. I I joined Cynic, and yeah, it was insane to be able to play in such a band. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's still like a great EP. And then next up is going flash forward to 2013. You did the New Dominion, Procreating the Undivine. You pretty much played bass on most of the album. So tell me about that because it's totally different compared to some of the other bands that you were a part of.
Yeah, there was a session job. Yuma van Ekelen, the drummer at the New Dominion, he worked together with Bart Hennephoff, the guitarist of Textures. They had a studio, and I already knew Yuma by then, of course. I have to dig a little in my memory. Because that Minion project, that was just something that he asked me to record the bass for. Um, so that was just a fun, side project. Or yeah, I never did any shows with them. It's just a studio project.
Yeah, and that
And
album is actually badass.
yeah, yeah, but the one thing I think the mix is not so bass friendly because we recorded really cool fretless bass parts, and you don't hear them at all.
Yeah,
I
they're like
think.
"Burr, burr, burr."
Yeah. I just but so the fretless bass got lost in the mix a little bit. So that's I think that's a shame, but yeah, it's definitely a pretty aggressive thrash album. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Right. And then, of course, next up, you did that same year, you did your last album, is Exvius Liminal. Tell me about making that.
Yeah, that was a totally different album for me. Um, where I think with that first Exvius album, we were really young and tried to do a lot. I think with Liminal, we were already grown up a little bit more. I think for me, that album feels a little bit more. How do you say that? Well, not serene, but at least a little more rested, I think. So there's more space. We didn't have that much urge to show off any technical prowess. So I think there, obviously, we were still in that whole fusion metal proggy area, so we didn't really leave that. But I think the attention got shifted a little bit more to uh, that we're actually making a song and it's actually music that people would like to listen to instead of just playing a lot of notes.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. And then flash forward to 2014, you did the Beaten Path by Morn, which would later become One Godless. So tell me about making that. And this year does mark 10 years of that EP. So how did you end up starting up that project?
Oh, Jesus, is that 10 years?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to do uh, a more fun project. I was a little, no, not burnt out, but I just I just wanted something to balance, I guess, the music I was doing, and I was uh, I did Exvius, I did Cynic, then we did Exvius again, and it was all uh, really technical oriented metal. Um, and as fun as it is to play that, I kind of wanted to do something else. And I remember, I remember just wanted to be able to uh, get on stage, have fun, have a few beers, and still be able to play that music and have a fun show. Um, and I figured it would be cool to have like a somewhat proggy uh, groove metal Pantera vibe. Um, so yeah, that's when I started at first with just pretty much myself writing some demo songs and then working together with a good friend of mine as a drummer and the vocalist we pretty much found pretty easily. Um, and the guitarist as well. I knew the guitarist from way back. So yeah, yeah.
And then flash forward to 2015, you did started up Our Oceans and you did the self-titled. So tell me about making that band because I was listening to that and just in preparation for the interview and it sounds
Hmm.
really sick. So tell me about making that.
Ah, cool. Yeah, our Oceans was, or actually still is, the project of Timon Kruidenier, which who was the guitarist for Exvius and in Cynic as well. Um, and I think at a certain point in our career, we all wanted to do something else besides the technical prog fusion metal that we were making. And where I went into the direction of more groove metal Pantera rip-off band, he drifted a little bit towards the more dreamy poppy thing, I guess. So he started writing the Our Oceans record, for which he asked me to do the bass parts. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a long while since I heard that album as well.
Yeah.
That's that's
Yeah, and it's crazy that next year will mark 10 years of that album.
yeah.
So how do you feel about that album almost a decade later?
Yeah. I remember listening back to it a few years ago when I was on holiday in I think Thailand or something, and there were a bunch of songs that I really liked because I really liked that whole dreamy, uh, slightly melancholic vibe. Um, so yeah, yeah, there's definitely a few songs on there that I'm still proud of. Yeah, yeah, and I think as always the Timon is I think one of the best audio engineers that I know. So production wise, all those albums that he made with me. Yeah, I
Yeah,
always enjoy listening back to it because the mixes are always really fantastic, I think.
totally. And then of course in 2017 you did the Mourner from One Godless. So
Yeah,
tell me about making the that album.
yeah. That kind of took a while for me to. There was just a lot of old stuff that I had lying around that I wanted to do something with. And um, at as at a certain point when I started Morn, we recorded that Beat and Path EP, and sometime after that we got we got a message from the management of a Spanish band called Morn, and they kindly requested us to change our name, and so not wanting to face any bullshit with lawyers, we figured, okay, let's just change the name to One God Last, because there was a band name I had in my mind for a few years already. So Morn went into One God Less, and sometime before recording that album, we had a shift in the personnel because the drummer Thomas he quit the band. So I asked Juma van Ekelen, the by then Exivius drummer, to record the album, and we had a different guitar player, Jordi, who joined sometime before that. And yeah, I think well, I listened to it some time ago, and I remember very clearly doing quite a few production sessions with Yuma, going over the song, seeing if the structure could be read better, or the songwriting. And I think the album could have been a little bit better. Um, I think I kind of missed the mark a little bit of making it more groovy and more easy to listen to. I think there's some stuff in there that's a little bit too proggy than I initially intended. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And of course, like this past June, we lost Peter. Peter.
yeah.
So is there like any like special memories like working with him?
Oh yeah, man. He was he was he was a fucking character. So yeah, there's a shitload of memories I very fondly think back on. Um, he was just one of the most sturdy guys I remember. He was just always there. Uh, didn't matter how hungover or sick or whatever. He was all you could really count on him, and his voice was super steady as well. I remember being in the studio with him, and working 8 9 hours a day, and him just flying through it without really any effort at all. So yeah, he was a good dude, man.
Yeah.
It's a shame that we lost him. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I know that that same year you did some more session work as you played bass with my homies in Nail Blithiscaris on their album Earn. So how'd you end up playing bass on that album? Because that's still one of my favorite albums from that year.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I think especially that intravenous song, I think
That was
is
like the
really
first song I heard from that, and I thought that little bass thing that you did was absolutely kick-ass.
yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I'm still really happy with how that turned out. Yeah, I think uh the bass player before that, um
Brendan.
yeah, Brandon, thanks. He was quitting the band at that point, so there was some weird stuff going on, and he was leaving the band, and apparently he had like something to say about who would be a good substitute for him. So I think he asked me, or he introduced me to the rest. I'm not sure. But it was through Brandon at least that he asked me to record that album. So yeah, I think that Intravenous single is probably still the single that has the most views that I played on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course they got Martino playing bass with them now. So how do you feel about
Yeah,
him like playing like the bass from like songs from Earn on that? And do you think like you ever look back, you're like, man, he nailed it?
yeah, I remember seeing because he recorded a playthrough before I got a chance to record a playthrough for that Intravenous song, and
Yeah,
uh, and he pretty much nailed it, I think. So yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, It's a good bass player, man. Yeah,
Nice. And then,
yeah,
of course, flash forward a few years to 2020, you did the next Our Oceans album, While Time Disappears. I thought that was a pretty good album. I know it was recorded under us, obviously, that the year that that certain virus that shall not be named happened. And I know during that whole time, like the whole pandemic sort of like fucked up the whole music industry and stuff, and it made
yeah.
a lot of, it was like a hard time for a lot of musicians. But for you personally, how did you like manage to like cope with that did you try to like just like record albums and try to focus on music just to help like distance yourself from that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm professionally. I didn't. Of course, I didn't play any songs or any shows in that whole time period. But other than that, um, I didn't have that much of difficulty with that time. Obviously, there was some issues with going out for dinner and stuff like that. But I teach at a conservatory in Holland, and those lessons just continued as normal. Um, and I could just keep doing session work. And so, yeah, it was not the most fun time ever, but yeah, it, it was what it was, and I think, yeah,
Yeah. And being as it has been like a few years since the last Our Oceans album, is there plans to do any more stuff, or what's the status with that?
yeah, yeah, definitely. We as in Timon is is mixing the new album right now, so it's going to be released somewhere in the next year. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway,
Oh.
got two more stuff to talk about. The next first up in 2022, you did Crown Compass with The Draught. Tell me about that because
Mhm.
I know it's like you and Yuma. So how did you end up starting up that band?
Yeah, it was a project of, or it still is a project, but the project started by Joe, the guitarist of Textures, the Dutch band again, and I remember that I think Yuma was talking about that he did that project with Joe, and I'm not sure what their plan exactly was at that point, but I definitely made sure that I was in the picture for recording that album because Joe is an amazing guitar player. If if I see how easily he plays those songs and how easily he noodles around in those songs, it's quite impressive to be to be in the room with him. I just wanted to be part of that album pretty much,
All right.
and and Joe really liked me recording bass for that album as well, so that really worked out really well. Um, but I'm really happy we pulled it off. But in a way it's going a little back, I think, to the Exvius days, as in how much information is in that album is it's a lot. I remember hearing those songs as demos without any vocals yet, and I thought instrumentally it's already uh, enough. So we could do this as an instrumental band as well. There's not really any need for vocals, but of course vocals were also added. Um, and it's yeah, it's just there's so much happening in that Crown Compass album, and I hope we are someday going to maybe, well, probably not re-record, but maybe bring out a version that's instrumental where everything is a little bit clearer. Um, because it's just a really fun album to listen to instrumentally also. So yeah, and we're also working on a new album right now. So
Cool.
there's more stuff coming. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, then of course, last but certainly not least, you joined up with Obscura. So how'd you get to know those guys, and were you like a fan of like the previous albums?
Yeah, we toured with them back in I don't know when, um, but we had a fun tour with them and with Exvius, and so we already knew each other, and I mean the technical proggy metal scene is not that big, especially if you're looking for fretless bass players. So they knew me after the Exvius tour, and I remember they at a certain point they were looking for a bass player back then, and they asked me if I was interested. But then I think Linus joined Obscura back then. Fast forward a few years, and here we are. And they were doing summer shows. So I got a message from Stefan, the main dude from Obscura, saying that they needed a bass player for I believe it was 6 or 7 shows in August, and I couldn't really do those shows um, because of my personal schedule, and there was just not enough time, and so I had to decline those shows. But I was smart enough, luckily, to say, "Yo, if you're looking for a bass player to record an album, I'm definitely interested." And I wasn't aware of it, but they were indeed recording the upcoming album by then. So that was a quite a nice timing, apparently. So I ended up doing one show with them, Brutal Assault, in August 5th or 6th, I think, and then recording the album in August as well. Yeah, yeah.
All right. And when you joined up with Obscura, were you like listening to like albums like Omnivia, VM Cosmogenesis, Sis and stuff, and be like, I need to play like this, or did you want to like bring like your own kind of like style into Obscura?
Yeah, no, I definitely brought my own style into Obscura. I know the previous Dutch bass player, Jeroen Paul Tesseling, I know pretty well. So I kind of know what their background is, bass player wise, I guess. But I'm hoping to not sound too arrogant, but I don't really like copying other people. So
Yeah,
I just try to bring my own influence to that band, and yeah. So
yeah. And of course, that we've heard like the first single, Silver Linings, off of a Sonication, which comes out in February. So with that first single, is that sort of like what the whole album's going to sound like, or is there like more stuff to be discovered?
no, there's definitely more stuff. There's a it's Obscura, so it is. I guess it's exactly what you expect it to be. It's gonna be technical. There's gonna be some faster songs. There's gonna be some slower songs.
All right.
Um, yeah,
Cool.
yeah,
And of course, now with Obscura having like different members from different countries, like of course, Stefan and Kevin are from Germany. James is in England, and then you are from, I believe Holland and stuff. So
yeah,
with having like different members from different countries, how does that sort of like affect like the chemistry and the dynamics within Obscura?
yeah. Well, I've joined pretty recently, so we're still you know feeling everything out, I guess. But um, up to this point, everyone's super easy to go along with, and I think one of the most important things as a musician it is to be, or at least try to be, not an asshole, and everyone seems to be pretty good at that. So everything goes well, and we'll see. Uh, Next year, 2025, we're going to do some tours, and we'll see what happens. I think only good stuff will come.
Okay. Cool. Anyway, I got two more questions for you. Talking about like your bass playing, because I know you've heard your fair share of bass player jokes and memes and all that stuff. But I love how you don't gravitate towards flashy bass playing. But I feel like you find ways to link what the guitars are doing with the melody and what the drums are doing with the rhythm. But for you,
Yeah.
whether it be with Obscura or Oceans or Crown Compass or any of the other projects that you've been involved with, what's your approach to like playing bass?
Um, that's a really good question. What I Well, let me maybe start with saying what I don't like. What I'm um, not the biggest fan of is when the bass player automatically just plays whatever the guitarist is playing, only an octave lower and probably half the timing. Um, so what I would like to do is obviously do that if that's the best option for that part of the song. But I always try to look for a bass part that complements the music, of course, and but I would like the bass part to be uh, just a cool part in itself. So if you would leave the guitars out and maybe leave the drums out, and you hear the bass part, that you can also hear, just some cool stuff happening. And not that it has to be flashy, but I like it to be that it has its own space. And what I have to think a little bit about the process that I have. But what I usually try to do is that I look for what the different guitar parts are doing, and I'm looking for if there's like a way that I can incorporate both those guitar parts, and if not, if I can bring something else, if there's space for that. Um, and of course being a bridge between the guitars and the drummer, so I have to feel out what's needed most. Yeah.
All right.
Sounds really difficult if I'm explaining it
No, no, no,
like
you're
this, I
doing
guess,
good,
but
man.
it's usually it's I try to be as uh how do you say that, like use my intuition as much as possible and just feel out whatever is needed, and yeah, try to be like open and creative, and yeah,
Awesome.
it's it's more about what the song needs than what I want to play. Um, but if I feel there's more space to do something, then I yeah would like to check that option, of course. Yeah.
Cool. And then the final question I want to ask you is talking about like your gear, because I feel like you have like a extinct bass tone with the fretless basses and all that other stuff. So I'm just curious, like in terms of like recording and playing live, what's like your setup in terms of like basses that you play, strings, pedals, amps, and all that stuff?
Yeah, yeah, it all kind of depends. I mean, with Crown Compass, I play a fretted Warwick streamer, yeah. And that goes into an EBS Fafner bass amp. Um, the pedals I use for that is pretty much just a compressor, a dark glass compressor, an EBS preamp sometimes, and a dark glass or a Trondheim distortion pedal. And for fretless bass, I have an awesome Rox bass, which is a builder from Breda, where I live. So that's really cool, local guy, and that bass just sounds amazing. So I rarely use any pedals for that at all. Mostly just a compressor, um, and yeah, either a preamp. I have an old Eden preamp, or I use also that EBS amp. Yeah, yeah.
All right. And sort of like in the end to sort of wrap things up, what's next for like you with Obscura or any of the other bands? Like is there any more tours in the works, and when can we expect like Obscura to come toward the States?
Uh, I'm thinking that would be next year. Um, Yeah, probably. So there's definitely going to be some Obscura tours coming up. There's a new Our Oceans record that's going to be released. There's going to be a new Crown Compass album that's going to be released. I also recorded an Amend uh, record, which is with Bart Hennephoff, the guitarist of Textures, that band again, and also Humo van Ekelen on drums. Um, yeah, so there's enough happening. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure I'll see the US in 2025 with Obscura. Yeah,
Cool. So thank you, Robin, for this interview and stuff. It was great to
sure.
be able to chat with you. It's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching this to close us out.
I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I hope you enjoy and keep enjoying the music that I make. So thanks. Thank you.
Awesome. So everybody, Robin Zielhorst, we'll see you next time.